And our moderator is Dr. Robin Anders, who is our coordinator of instructional technology. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Caseo.
Thank you, Dr. Knopik. And thank you everybody for coming and attending this session tonight, especially those of you who have made it through all of the sessions. We really appreciate your attendance. Thank you. So this one is the fourth meeting, as Dr. Knopik said, and we're going to be talking about what we're going to do with our supplemental funding surplus. And we'll give you an update on where we are with all of that. So the supplemental planning or supplemental funding, of course, I wanted to remind you, is part of the LCAP. It's part of the local control funding formula that is specific for helping our subgroups, our English learners, our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, our homeless students, and our foster youth. So the funds are meant particularly to help them. Next slide, please. When we develop our LCAP plan, there are a lot of pieces that are given to us that we have to include in the development. And one of them is the 8 state priorities. So we have to keep these in mind. So if you look, it has our teacher assignments, our textbooks, our facilities, of course, that we're making progress towards our standards, which we measure with student achievement. We look at student engagement, attendance, absenteeism, the graduation rate, dropout rate. There's a lot of different factors that we look at. School climate, pupil access, and other outcomes in terms of our academics as well. Next slide, please. And these are our 4 district LCAP goals. So one, we reviewed, which is that students will be career and college ready. The second is more about their physical and emotional health. We want to make sure that we have well-rounded students and we're looking at the whole child. We, for goal 3, want to retain and recruit quality employees. We want to make sure that we have efficient and effective operations. So those are the 4 goals that we have as a district that guide our LCAP. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is again our unduplicated pupil count, which is how we get our supplemental funding and how it's allocated. And if you look at 2020 and 2021, you'll see that we had 5,414 students, and this year we had 5,074, and we are on a steady decline. We are taking measures to try to mitigate that and to encourage enrollment in our district, but we have been looking at a decline for the last several years, as has the state. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at our first goal and where we are to date. So when we had our last meetings, we were looking at the first interim estimated actuals, and now we have our second interim estimated actuals. And what that means is if you look at our budgeted expenditures in the first column, that is what we estimated or predicted that it was going to cost us for each of these items. The first interim is a checkpoint to see what we've spent so far and if we're still on track to spend what we budgeted or if we're over or under. And the second interim is the next checkpoint to see, where we are, if we're still on track with our budgeted expenditure or if we're going to come in under or over. And you'll see in the next several slides for some of the items, we're under and some we're over, and for others, we're right on track. Next slide, please. So here are more of those same items, where we're looking at, these are some of the larger ones, like for example, the third one is our professional development day costs. That stayed the same because we've already expended that, but some of these depend on particular teachers and what they earn. For example, the very last one is a 0.2 or an extra assignment for our peer assistance and review teacher. We estimated 23,898, but the actuals come in as whatever the particular teacher earns, because every teacher earns a different rate dependent on years of experience and education. So that changes some of our estimated actuals too. And that's not just that one, it's in a lot of our teacher costs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you can see, for example, and most of them in general tend to be a little bit higher, but we do have some where we came in under cost as well. So next slide, please. Okay. So on this one, let's see, was there, yes, so like on the first one, that came in slightly below cost for the library coordinators. And when we get to the very end of all the actions, you'll see in one of our slides that the net result of all of this is that we do have a little bit of surplus even this year.
And then Sharon, if I could just interject, sometimes it has to do with employment opportunities. And so people move on, positions become open, and then there is a lag period of time where we're not paying for anyone in that position. And so that budget still stays there. And then when we hire that new person, we once again visit the expenditures and the budgeted expenditures and then get a more accurate measure. Like with librarians, as an example, we had some openings during the year.
Absolutely. And this slide is important to look at because you'll see in parentheses that it has base fund. So even though it was part of our LCAP plan, it was not attached to our supplemental funding. So it is not going to be something that we're considering in terms of funding and planning. Next slide, please.
Oh, Sharon, I have a quick
Yes.
question.
Sure.
Okay, so the prior slide that has provide support for students with disabilities to achieve their IEP goals. For those supports, are they like special acadized SAI minutes, or is it related services? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by support.
So I believe, and Dr. Knopfik, you can also jump in, that this is our maintenance of effort for special education in the base fund. So
And
it's
it's our
all
personnel costs mainly.
Yeah.
Okay, so personnel costs in terms of
Teachers, instructional assistants.
got it. Okay,
Everybody.
that's good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to goal 2, and remember goal 2 had to do with our students' physical and emotional mental well-being. And you can see the different items that we had budgeted for that and how we are doing in terms of our estimated actuals with the second interim report here. And here's more of the same with the same goal. And then
And
we had,
Sharon,
yes.
for the prior page, it has intervention sections with $0, 0 grant funded. Can you explain what that is and why there is no money there?
Because we had other funding that we were able to use instead of this funding. So we knew that we were going to have it, so we didn't put it into this budget. So for example, we had some one-time COVID money that was specific for intervention, so we used that.
And then the intervention, what type of services would that be?
So that would be classes at the secondary level and some increased RTI allocations at the elementary level.
Thank you.
Sections, classes is what I mean. Okay. So again, we're continuing with our goal 2 actions, and you can see that some of this we're still in the planning phase. We're working on enrollment recovery and our enrollment planning for professional development. We're trying to deal with some of our low enrollment and providing specialized programs and supports for students. So next slide, please. Okay, goal 3. So for this one, this is where we had the expense for our diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator. We have our professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion and technology. And we have our certificated personnel and administrative costs at the district and site level. So this is part of our goal 3 in trying to further our diversity and equity goals for the district. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to start talking about carryover, because even with all of those action items, I had told you at the very beginning, when we did our first presentations, that we had roughly 2.5 million, and that went up to 3 million. And then we, as you saw, the end result of the second interim report is that we have a little bit from this year too. So we're going to be talking about what we're doing with that money. But these are some of the considerations that we reviewed before, that we can't really change the LCAP because it's a 3-year plan. And we're just completing the first year. So we have 2 more years left in this one. And like I said earlier, it's not likely that we're going to radically change goals, but it is, very possible that we'll change action items in that new plan, because there's a lot of different ways to accomplish the goals that we have. So that's what we'll be looking at in 2 years. But for now, what we want to do, because it's also a new requirement, is that we have to account for all of our carryover dollars. So we want to get some input from you about how we're going to be doing that. So the other things that we can't do is we can't modify the plan. We can add specific one-time actions with these extra funds, but we can't write a new goal. So, and we don't use that kind of money to fund positions either, because the positions would be ongoing and this funding is not ongoing. It's one-time carryover. So next slide, please. So this is a really important slide. So it shows our estimated actuals with second interim, which is what we're projecting our costs to be at the end of the year. And it also shows our budgeted amount. So this is where I told you we have a little bit of extra this year as well. So that was 68,135 to add to our other carryover funds from the prior 2 years, which is $3,608,482, which sounds like a lot of money, but we also have a lot of costs. So the first thing that you can look at, and the first thing to remember, is that 89% of our supplemental budget is personnel. So currently that's $9,667,605. And we need to set aside 6% for increases due to the salary schedule, and also for individual teachers that move up step and column as well, where they get an increase based on years in the district and their education. So all of that combined is $580,056. And then we have to apply it for 2 years because we have 2 more years of this plan. So that would be $1,160,112. Now, back at the beginning of this slide presentation, and we've covered it for a couple of meetings now, is our declining enrollment. So that impacts currently how we're funded. So that means that we're expecting to get $2,201,042 less in supplemental funding. So we have to account for that in our carryover extra as well. And you can see that's the biggest piece right there. That's going to impact, how we spend our carryover and how much carryover we actually have. So it's taking all of our costs out of that. We have 247,327 in carryover. However, that's an estimate because we don't have the May revise of the governor's budget yet. And that could change. I mean, we could get, it's unlikely, I can't say 100%, but it's unlikely it would be less, but it could be a little bit more. So that's why it's important for us to know what you think and where you want those extra dollars to go. So next slide, please. So these are some of the proposed action items so far. So we have, again, support for ELD classes in grades 6 through 12, trying to keep those classes smaller. We had an unusual surge in enrollment this year that impacted the class size of many of our schools. The second one is secondary summer school stipends. We know that we will have an increased need for summer school. We're still helping students to get caught up and back on track from the pandemic. We have iReady internet-based assessment and intervention, which is an online program that not only assesses students and lets us know how close they are to grade level, but it also provides the intervention. So it will say, they need to work on X, Y, and Z, and then it has the materials within the program for them to work on that as well. So it has a pretty complete system. Next slide, please. Another one is intervention costs. And as Ms. Dunkel was saying, it would be adding additional intervention allocations at elementary and classes at secondary. Diversity, equity, and inclusion supplemental materials. And as you know, we have a need for materials for our school libraries, our classrooms, and our schools in terms of sets of novels and classroom novels as well. So we would like to set aside some money for that as well. And there's an ever increasing need for translation services. Next slide, please.
Question in the chat about the classes you were discussing, if those would be added for this year or just for next year?
Next year. We have been addressing, if we're talking about the English learner classes, we have been addressing that as the need has come up and have had to add classes this year during the middle of the year. So, but in general, what's on this chart is for next year. So we also, next slide, please. These are some of the costs that those proposed items would be. So if you look at a teacher 0.2 assignment, so and why that matters is because if we're going to give a teacher another class, that is the estimated cost of what it would be. That varies based on if it's a brand new teacher or an experienced teacher, but the average is 24,000. Our extra hourly costs for teachers would be 41.29 for planning and 55.66 for actually working with students. Counselor extra duty is the same. Instructional aides, 16.73 to 21.37. Teacher stipends, this is the estimate for a stipend for summer school. And an hour of professional development for all teachers is approximately $40,000. Next slide, please. So we also talked about the support for ELD classes. So again, this is $168,000 for 7 sections. Secondary summer school stipends, these are more totals. For 60 teachers, that would be $110,000. The iReady assessment and intervention is $300,000. But it doesn't mean, I just want to take a time out here. It doesn't mean that we would need all of that money to be able to put money towards some of these items. For example, I want to point out the iReady assessment and intervention. It could be split funded between different pots of money, but we could have some from here, some from other places as well. And the same with the summer school stipends. It doesn't mean we would necessarily need to take all of the money from this pot of money, but we could contribute.
I would add the same for the first 2 as well. So the 7 sections would provide 1 section at each secondary school, but there's possibility that not all secondary schools would need an additional section.
Correct. Thank you. So, and then down towards the bottom, you'll see the FAFSA applications, and that's the federal form that students have to fill out to qualify for financial aid. And one of the things that's happening is that there's a new California requirement, a new law, that all seniors will have to complete that. And we have to make sure that they have that opportunity. And if parents don't want them to complete the form, then we have to have something in writing from that parent that acknowledges that. So we will be needing more help from our counselors to make this happen. And then then the last item was the full day of professional development for all teachers. Robin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, we have some questions that have popped up, so we got to catch up a little bit.
Okay.
For the estimated costs listed on page 20, is that per teacher? For example, how many extra teachers are you estimating teacher 0.2 of FTE? How many teachers would get the teacher stipend for summer school? So this, I'm going back to that slide. The 24,000 is to fund one teacher in an extra class for the entire school year.
Correct.
And then how many teachers would get the teacher stipend for summer school? I think on the next slide, we estimated that possibly.
Yes, we put in 60, but it could be a little more or a little less.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then our next question was about the FAFSA. If you cannot pay for ongoing items, how can you use LCAP funds for this? As far as it being an ongoing item.
We would have to change funding. This would be like extra hourly, so it's not like a position. Does that make sense? Okay.
And then these funds shown here are extra to the action items that already exist. And that's in a question, and that would be yes. So these are additional action items that we would use our carryover funds to fund.
Yes, a couple of them that are items that we already fund, but we would do more because it's we see a greater need, like intervention, for example. Okay, next slide. Okay, so Dr. Anders, do you want to explain this part since you put this together for us?
Sure. So I'm going to put a survey in the link. There's going to be an opportunity for everyone to provide their input regarding not only these proposed actions, well, primarily these proposed actions to rank order what we have here in front of us, but also to get any other feedback or proposals from everyone that's participating. So I'm going to post that in the chat, and you can complete that right now or in the future. Hold on a second, let me get back to this. And then we have some new questions. So go ahead and use that link that was just posted to enter into that survey. And we'll continue to ask questions as you complete the survey. Caroline said we had asked about funding ukuleles for all the schools that don't have them. It was not on, it was on the list at some point. Why did it come off?
Right, because that's not one that we can justify in terms of our target group of population of students. So that's why it came off the list. And we also are looking at other funding for that as well.
What does new immigrant support look like, or what resources are going to be used to support them?
So one of the things that we're working on right now is planning extra support for them in the summer. and making sure, because we had a lot of brand new immigrants this year, and we want to make sure they have a good start for next year, because oftentimes they come in the middle of the year.
As far as the slide and the $100,000 estimate, that was to provide an additional hour of instructional aid support every day for the school year for each site.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
I was helping to answer.
Oh,
the question.
Okay.
So as far as what new immigrant support looks like in the ranking proposed actions,
Yes.
the $100,000 estimate was that it was to provide one additional hour all year long for each site of instructional aid support. There are concerns about intervention costs using partial APEX. Partial APEX, would that be available to special ed students? So I believe that's a question about the survey.
So APEX is available to special ed students, but we also have a different program that's more accessible called Cyber High, and we make that available to them as well.
Oh, that was in the rank order. Yeah. And then, okay, no more. Oh, how long do we have to fill out the survey? Does it have to be done this evening? The answer to that is no. The survey will be posted to the website tomorrow, and then along with the recording of this meeting and the slides, and then it'll stay posted probably through May, I would assume. Do we have, I don't know, Sharon, if we have an exact date.
So I was hoping that Dr. Knopper could give us a timeline of the next steps, because that will determine how long it can stay open.
We'd like to go ahead and collect the data by the middle towards the end of April. So probably like about April 20th, and we'll post the deadline date too. That way, this will give us enough time to go ahead and do some research, to go ahead and plan out the budget, because we will be having a town hall meeting with the Board of Education in May, probably May 14th-ish, and that's a pure guess on my part. It has not been set at this point in time, but that's typically when it is. And at that meeting, we'll go ahead and share out all of our budgeted items, budgeted expenditures, and then get input from the board too at that point in time. And it's also available for the public to go ahead and weigh in too. So about April 20th, I would guess.
Follow-up question about the intervention costs as far as it partially funding APEX for secondary. We're asking if that funding is also used for Cyber High. Is that through these funds as well?
No, we don't use these funds for Cyber High. We have been using our COVID funds for that, but we also will shift that cost to instructional lottery funds. And the reason why we're shifting it to lottery and not here is because special education students are actually not a designated subgroup for the supplemental LCAP.
Question about if any of these items will help address credit improvement, or I think grade improvement.
So not specifically. It will in terms of the summer school stipends and having a more robust program. If we can get more teachers, we'll be able to offer more classes for students to get credit recovery and also grade improvement. But in addition to these funds, we also have the A through G grant specifically, which is to fund additional classes to help students get back on track through grade improvement and credit recovery.
From your last response, when you mentioned lottery funds, there's a question about what those are.
So there are two types of lottery funds, and one helps the general fund, And the other one is instructional lottery. And currently we use it to fund textbooks and supplemental instructional materials. So this would be an item that we would use this funding for, the Cyber High, because it's a supplemental instructional material.
And those funds are generated from the California State Lottery.
Mhm.
Will the grade improvement classes offered have a cost?
No, they currently do. If students want to do grade improvement, they have to go to the adult school and pay a fee. But the A through G grant is going to subsidize the cost of that for us. So our students, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, will not have to, with the duration of the grant.
So that was actually the next question, was how long the A through G grant will last and when it'll be applied. And it sounds like Sharon already answered that.
So we will actually be starting this summer, and we have until 2026 to expend the grant, but it's the same allocation. It doesn't renew. So altogether we got, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say 700 and something thousand.
88,
Peter.
yeah.
So we're pretty excited about that. Although I can't take credit for that one. We do write a lot of grants in our office, but that one we didn't have to write. We just had to write a plan. They gave us the money. So that was nice.
So again, we'll post the recording of this meeting, and then the link to the survey that was shared in the chat will also be posted to the website. We'd like feedback from anyone in the community as far as an educational partner. So if there's other parents or stakeholders that would like to submit their input, please encourage them to do so.
Yes, please.
So with that, I want to thank Mrs. Casale for her presentation this evening, Dr. Anders for his moderation tonight, for our translators, Anna and Nuria, and for all of our participants too, with the healthy and very vibrant conversation we've had this evening.
Yes,
We
thank
do
you.
really respect your input and appreciate all that you do each and every day for each of us and the district and our children in the district too.
Mhm.
And I
thank
noticed
you,
too
Kelly.
that Kelly's mentioning council PTA and how the survey could be pushed up that way too. So that's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any closing thoughts, Ms. Casale, Dr. Anders?
No, just thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. I'm going to go ahead